Chevy put a man in a steel cage and turned a 700-pound grizzly bear loose next to a Ford. They spent years and a fortune hammering Ford for one decision they were sure was a fatal mistake. There was just one problem. Ford kept winning anyway. So what did Ford know that Chevy didn't? But to understand how two truck companies ended up throwing bears at each other, you have to go back to where this started. And it did not start with trucks. It started with two men who could not stand each other. The Chevrolet name comes from a real guy. Louis Chevrolet, a Swiss race car driver with a temper to match his talent. He teamed up with William Durant, the man who built General Motors, and they launched Chevrolet in 1911. Here's the part that gets me. Louis wanted to build a big, expensive, beautiful machine. Durant wanted something cheap that could go punch the Ford Model T right in the mouth. They fought about everything. The story goes Durant told Louis to quit smoking cheap cigarettes in front of customers because it looked low class. Louis told him, "I gave you my name, but I'm not giving you my personality." And he walked, sold his share, signed away the rights to his own last name. And that decision haunted him. Louis Chevrolet spent his final years as a mechanic on a factory floor, grease up to his elbows, inside a building with his own name bolted to the side. He died with almost nothing. Durant did not land much softer. The man who built one of the largest companies on earth lost control of it twice and ended up running a bowling alley in Flint. So before there was ever a single horsepower argument, the bow tie was already a story about how chasing big dreams can chew up the people who start it. But the cars they left behind were just getting warmed up. And the first real battlefield was under the hood. Here is where I have to give it to you straight, because this is a Chevy channel, and I am still not going to lie to you. In the engine wars, Chevy embarrassed Ford over and over again, for decades. It kicked off in 1929. Chevy rolled out an overhead valve six-cylinder, the famous stove bolt, and the sales pitch was a 6 for the price of a 4. Ford was still selling 4 cylinders. Chevy handed you 2 extra cylinders for basically the same money. Ford scrambled and fired back in 1932 with the flathead V8, which was a massive deal, real 8-cylinder power for the working man. But if you bought one of the early ones, congratulations, you were the test dummy. Those first flatheads cracked blocks and ran hot enough to fry an egg on the manifold. Then came 1955, and the moment that changed everything. The Chevy small block V8, 265 cubic inches. I think it did more for this country than any motor ever built, and I will fight anybody who says otherwise. It was light, it was cheap to build, and it was designed so you could keep bolting power onto it forever. That little V8 grew into the 283, the 327, the 350 still sitting in shops all over America right now. Ford's answer, the Y block, got left behind so fast they gave up on it within a few years. I have watched Ford guys, actual diehard Ford guys, admit the small block was just the better motor. That is how lopsided it got. But the small block was only the warm-up, because Chevy built something later that Ford has never once been able to touch. Fast forward to 1997 and the LS engine. This is the one. This is the trump card. The LS is so good, so compact, and so easy to make power with that people now yank perfectly healthy engines out of other cars just to stuff an LS in the hole. I am talking BMW. I am talking Mazda. I have stood in my own shop and watched a guy pull a running motor out of an import and drop in a junkyard LS he paid pocket change for, grinning like he robbed a bank. Ford has nothing, and I mean nothing, with that swap anything reputation. The Coyote that Ford builds today is a fantastic engine, do not get me wrong. The thing revs to the moon. But it is wide, it is complicated, and nobody is spending their Saturday tearing a car apart to force one in. That is the difference. Chevy did not just build great engines. Chevy built the engine the entire world wants to steal. So at this point, you are probably thinking, this is a blowout. Chevy wins, roll the credits. But here is where I keep myself honest, because Ford has a couple trophies on the shelf that I am not going to sit here and pretend do not exist. Take Le Mans. In 1966, Ford showed up at that race in France. It is the toughest, longest race in the world. Ford beat Ferrari with the GT40, finishing 1, 2, 3. It was so dramatic they made a Hollywood movie about it. Henry Ford II wanted them buried so badly that before the race, the story goes, he handed his team boss a note with 3 words on it: "You better win." And they were not messing around. They ran a race engine on a dyno for 48 hours straight, running it just like the real race, just to prove it would not blow up. 50 years later, Ford went back and won that class again. And on that exact same day, both factory Corvettes broke down and limped off the track. Yeah, that one stings. So no, this is not a clean sweep. Ford knows how to build a weapon when they actually decide to care. Which brings us right back to that grizzly bear. Now let's talk trucks, because this is where it gets personal. In 2015, Ford did something the entire industry thought was flat out crazy. They built the F-150 out of aluminum. The body, the bed, all of it switched from steel to aluminum and dropped around 700 pounds off the truck. Lighter rig, better fuel economy, and no more rusted out fenders. And how did Chevy react? They lost their minds. They smelled blood in the water. They were dead certain Ford had just fumbled the whole game. So Chevy went on the attack with some of the pettiest, funniest commercials you will ever see. They stuck guys in a steel cage next to a Ford and let a grizzly bear loose. They dumped piles of landscaping block into both beds to dent the Ford up. They ran ads swearing the aluminum truck would cost you a fortune to fix. For a couple years there, Chevy was dunking on Ford in every single commercial break, and I will admit it, as a Chevy guy, it was a blast to watch. There was just one problem with all those clever Chevy commercials. They did not work. Ford kept right on outselling Chevy the entire time. Truck buyers did not care about the bear. They cared that the aluminum truck was lighter, hauled more, and was not going to rot out the back fenders after 10 Midwest winters. And here comes my bold take, the one that is going to light up the comments. Ford was right. The aluminum bed was the smart move, and Chevy clinging to steel while laughing about it has aged like a gallon of milk left on the porch. Making fun of the other guy for being ahead of you is not a plan. That is exactly what Ford knew that Chevy didn't. You do not win the truck war with comedy. You win it by building the truck people need. But before any Ford guys in the comments get too comfortable, let me drag both of these companies out into the light, because lately, neither one has clean hands. Let's start in my own house, because I am not here to protect Chevy. Right now, GM is buried in one of the ugliest engine recalls I have seen in years. Their 6.2 V8, the L87, the motor living in their biggest trucks and SUV models, has a bearing problem that can grenade the whole engine without much warning. We are talking close to 600,000 vehicles dragged back to the dealer, tens of thousands of complaints, trucks just dropping dead on the highway. And you want to hear GM's brilliant fix? Run thicker oil and say a prayer. That is embarrassing, and the folks who paid 60, 70 grand for those trucks deserve a whole lot better. But Ford, do not laugh too hard. Ford gave us the 6.0 Power Stroke diesel, and if you know, you know. I had one of those crawl into my shop years back, the owner damn near in tears, and that engine fought us on everything it had. Blown head gaskets, failing coolers, electronics throwing a tantrum every time you cleared one code. Ford got sued over that motor, settled, and then turned around and sued the company that built it for them. So the next time somebody swears their brand never breaks, I want you to picture the L87 and the 6.0 sitting right next to each other. Every car maker has a skeleton in the closet. Anybody who tells you different is selling something. So after all of it, after 100 years of grudges and bears and blown up engines, where does this fight stand today? And this part caught me completely off guard. The future of this rivalry is electric. And right now, on paper, Chevy is landing a real punch. The Silverado electric truck is rated at 492 miles on a single charge. Ford's electric F-150, the Lightning, gets you around 320. That is not a close race. That is a different area code. The Chevy charges faster and tows more on top of it. Now, I will be fair, the Lightning is the nicer truck to drive and Ford got to the party first. But on raw range, Chevy showed up to win. Then there is the Corvette, which at this point is just Chevy flexing on everybody. The latest Z06 runs a V8 with no turbo and no supercharger, just raw air. It screams out 670 horsepower, the strongest one ever dropped into a production car. Ford builds monsters too. Their GT500 makes more peak power with a supercharger bolted on top. But for pure engineering with no help at all, that crown is sitting in Chevy's case, and it is not close. Some things never change. So here is where I land after all of it. This rivalry was never really about which badge is better. It is about two completely different ways of thinking. Chevy spent 100 years building the engine the whole world wants to copy. Ford spent that same century chasing checkered flags and quietly outselling everybody at the dealership. They are both winning. They are just winning at totally different games. And that, more than any bear or any bumper sticker joke, is why this fight is never going to end. Now, before you go, one piece of advice that could save your Chevy. If you are even thinking about changing your transmission fluid, do not touch it until you watch my video on it first. There is a mistake people make all the time that quietly kills a perfectly good transmission, and once it is done, it is done. Go watch that transmission video next. It is the kind of thing you really do not want to learn the hard way. But I want to hear from you. Are you team bow tie or team blue oval? And what is the one thing the other side will never admit to your face? Drop it in the comments. I read them, and trust me, this argument is nowhere near over.